Welcome to this special St Andrew's Day edition of the Alex Salmond Show. To mark Scotland's National Day, we travelled to Edinburgh, where I interviewed Scotland's greatest living historian, Sir Tom Devine, who answers the key question, whither Scotland? I also caught up with former Labour MP Dennis Canavan, who wants to see an even bigger celebration of this auspicious day. We'll hear from them both shortly. And Tasmin Ahmed Sheikh met with talented Scottish designers Holly Mitchell and Lindsay Blackburn of Totty Rocks, who epitomise why tartan is the new black. And joining me in the studio will be Kenny McCaskill, former Scottish Cabinet Secretary for Justice, the man at the centre of the most controversial decision ever by the Scottish Government, the freeing in 2009 of the only man convicted of the Lockerbie bombing. But first, thank you for the tweets, messages and emails. Let's have a look at a few of them. Well, firstly, at Ren857, watched Alex Salmond's show on RT out of curiosity. Have to say it was pretty good, covering a range of subjects outside of politics. Interview with Jackie Stewart on dyslexia and dementia was really interesting. Yeah, we've had a huge reaction, Ren, to the powerful comments from Sir Jackie Stewart on these subjects. For example, at Redcliffe Scott says, the Alex Salmond show is a breath of fresh air. Hearing Sir Jackie was astonishing. There is no limit to your aspirations. And then that Sporty Bill says, just caught up with the excellent and insightful Alex Salmond and RT. Go on yourself, Sporty Bill. Or according to the right-wing media, it was about a man wearing a horrible shirt. Sporty Bill, there is nothing wrong with my shirts. Don't read the right-wing media. An email from Michael Takala says, Dear Alec, please issue a correction on your next show. At the end of your show, you refer to Gabriel as an archangel. The Old Testament makes clear the only archangel is Michael. Well, I'm not so sure, Michael. Both the Jewish and indeed the Muslim tradition have Gabriel as an archangel, but whether he's an archangel or just an angel, even Gabriel would have huge difficulty making a success of the Brexit negotiations. And finally, at Change 64 Meister, no truth in the rumour that Alex Salmond is going to appear on Love Island? Well, Change Meister, it's a rumour I've been trying to encourage. Let's put it this way. There's a lot more chance of me going on Love Island than of me going into the jungle. The St Andrew is the patron saint of many countries, including Russia, Ukraine and Greece. However, it is Scotland which has adopted the 30th of November as our National Day. It is celebrated around the world enthusiastically by expatriate Scots and their friends. If you're watching this show in Hong Kong or Singapore today, and you bump into some jolly tartan-clad men apparently wearing skirts, then the chances are they're on their way to a St Andrew's Day event in Scotland's national dress, the kilt. However, I know someone who's determined to see this day as a full-scale national holiday in Scotland. Former member of the Westminster and Scottish Parliaments, Dennis Canavan, states his case.
Scotland is one of the few countries in the world that doesn't have a national holiday. Just one day in the year when we can celebrate our national identity. The French have got Bastille Day, the Irish have got St Patrick's Day, the United States of America have got two national holidays. They've got the Thanksgiving Day and Independence Day. And here in Scotland, you know, we're near the bottom of the European League in terms of the number of public holidays compared with other countries. And I would like to see St Andrew's Day becoming a national day. It's the nearest thing that we have already to a national day. It's the day of our patron saint. He's been our patron saint for over 1,000 years. And it's now over 10 years since I introduced a bill in the Scottish Parliament to have a bank holiday on or around St Andrew's Day, and that bill eventually received the unanimous support of all members of the Scottish Parliament, irrespective of their party. Unfortunately, recognition of the bill recognition of the holiday is rather patchy, and I would like to see St Andrew's Day becoming more and more widely recognised as a national holiday, a huge opportunity for the people of Scotland to come together and celebrate our national identity, our multiculturalism and our membership of the international community.
Dennis Canavan, it's more than 10 years since you initiated the legislation to make St Andrew's Day a holiday. So why are you still having to call for it now?
Well, unfortunately, all that the bank holiday legislation does is it allows for the postponement of a financial transaction until the next working day without incurring any penalty. It does, unfortunately, not oblige any employer to give the workers a day off.
But surely there's lots of celebrations taking place. There are torchlight processions in Glasgow, the museums are open in Edinburgh, there's celebrations at Loch Lomond. Isn't there a huge amount of celebration going on across Scotland?
Yes, and I think that since I introduced my bill in the Scottish Parliament over 10 years ago, I think that there has been a significant increase in the celebration of St Andrew's Day with various cultural and other events. But I feel very, very strongly that if St Andrew's Day were made a school holiday, for example, then that would lead to a significant increase in recognition of the holiday, because many of the parents would want the day off to celebrate St Andrew's Day with their children.
So you think that school holiday is the key, but how do we make St Andrew's Day both a national and an international celebration?
Well, I think that we need action at parliamentary level, Scottish parliamentary level. I think we need action at local government level. At present, only 3 out of 32 local authorities have a school holiday on or around St Andrew's Day. But at international level too, I know that there is a campaign going on, and there already are celebrations towards the end of November in the Basque country, in Bilbao, and there has been some international dimension added to that with the celebration of what's called Fair Saturday on the last Saturday of November in other countries throughout Europe and indeed in South America. And there is a campaign going on now in Scotland to try and internationalise the Fair Saturday so that that will become St Andrew's Fair Saturday, a wonderful opportunity for all the people of Scotland to come together and celebrate our national identity, and at the same time having an international dimension to it.
Which is about giving, and it's about charity, and it's about an international approach to redressing the balance of the consumer society. But do you think, Dennis Canavan, that you can win this campaign?
Oh, I'm absolutely positive. I mean, we have had a significant measure of success already in the celebration of St Andrew's Day, and I am confident that in the years to come this is going to grow and eventually we'll have a national holiday to celebrate St Andrew's Day, our patron saint, and to celebrate our national identity and our membership of the international community.
Dennis Canavan, thank you very much. Knowing Dennis, I wouldn't be at all surprised if he succeeds. Now, in the last generation, Scotland's colourful history has taken some dramatic political turns. Living and working through that process has been one of the great historians of our time, Sir Tom Devine, author of the seminal work, The Scottish Nation. We met in Edinburgh, where I asked him how a historian interprets events when he is living through this changing political landscape.
Well, one of the advantages, of course, is we can see it in context and perspective over the long term, and we can judge the extent to which that change is so fundamental and possibly quite original in Scotland's historical experience.
Now, one of your seminal works, The Scottish Nation, looked at the Scottish history over a more than 300-year period. How does the last 30 years of Scotland's story compare in terms of the significance of that change?
Well, Scotland's first economic miracle in the 18th century was very fast, much faster than England's, but there's nothing to compare with the last 30 or 40 years. Its culture, economy, politics, religion even, and even identity, they have been transformed over this period. It's an unprecedented period, especially in Scotland's history of change.
And the independence debate, and look at, or the constitutional debate more broadly, how important is the European dimension to that debate?
If Brexit happens, then the debate is obviously very much back on the table and is alive again. If it doesn't happen, then that might be a difficulty, especially if there's a Corbyn victory in the next general election.
So you're saying that Brexit would help the cause of Scottish independence?
Undeniably so, because it would put Scotland towards a potential economic precipice, and it will almost independence might start to be regarded as almost a lifebelt in that context.
And the choice then for Scotland would be between Europe or London? Correct.
And then London might join us, because a lot of people there voted to remain.
And finally, Sir Tom, the question I've been dying to ask a historian, whether Scotland, what's going to happen now?
Well, of course, my orthodox answer to that, Alex, is the future is not my period. All one can say is that this period of momentous change, if anything, will probably accelerate, especially technologically. And of course, within a few years, we'll know more about the constitutional position, because the Brexit thing will then be resolved for good or for ill. I'm still on record as saying I don't think it will happen.
Well, I think it's quite difficult to stop now, but you don't think it'll happen because people see sense, or you're talking about politicians seeing sense?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult because the current political class saving your presence, I think, is pretty inadequate, and so therefore anything could occur in that respect. But I think there's signs already that Labour might be moving towards a more sceptical position. Now, whether that results in a plebiscite, another referendum or not, is very difficult to tell. And this is one of the reasons why the future is not my period.
But I have to press you, whither Scotland in that changing landscape?
I think I'm very positive about the country. I mean, it underwent a tremendous but silent economic transformation in the later part of last century. I think it's much more equipped to deal with the modern world. But those waters out there, those waters in the future, Alex, are very treacherous, and anything could happen. And this is partly because of personalities and events, dear boy. And that's why the forces shaping the future can often be interrupted by those particular influences.
But basically a positive outlook?
Absolutely positive, because I mean, I love my country, and I think it's much better equipped to deal with the future than it was in the dying days of the heavy industries, you know, in the late 60s, 70s and early 80s. And it does have a parliament from which more power, more muscle can grow over time.
Sir Tom Devine, thank you very much.
Thank you.
What a fascinating insight from Sir Tom Devine. Coming up after the break, we'll be hearing from Tasmina, who met up with the Scottish fashion designers behind Totty Rocks. I also spoke to Kenny McCaskill in an in-depth interview about the circumstances surrounding the release of Abdul Basit al-Megrahi, the only man ever convicted of the Lockerbie bombing.
They called me a useful idiot.
I'm a useful idiot.
You called me a useful idiot.
A useful idiot.
An useful idiot.
For expressing my opinions on RT.
There are thousands of us doing it.
Behind this report is a simple strategy. We attack persons instead of talking about the arguments.
What's next?
Why stop there?
You'll ban me from getting this close to the White House?
I'm with the group code pink. Why not ban the color pink?
Why not stretch me on the rack?
I should be sent to the Tower of London because I'm a traitor.
Break me on the wheel.
I have to put up with a lifetime of this sort of nonsense.
You don't scare me.
You won't scare us.
And I'll continue to voice my opinion.
I'll continue to speak out.
I'm in good company.
But I'm in good company.
You can explain your ideas.
Because we are free thinkers.
At RT, we have a great team, but we needed to strengthen before the FIFA World Cup. And who better than a legend to keep it tight at the back?
In 1992, Denmark qualified for the European Championships at the very last moment. No one believed in us, but we won. And I'm hoping to bring some of that winning spirit to the RT team. Recently, I've had a lot of practice, so I can guarantee you that Peter Schmeichel will be on the best form since my last World Cup. Microphone lens, throw it, please. That was an old joke. I was only kidding. Here I come, Russia. Right. No, left, more left. Okay, stop. That's really good, that.
Max Kaiser's Financial Survival Guide. Housing bubble. Oh, you mean there's a downside to artificially low mortgage rates? Don't get carried away. Watch Kaiser Report.
Welcome back to our St Andrew's Day special. Now, not only is Scotland world-renowned for our fabulous food and drinks industry, our fashion industry continues to thrive.
Scotland is blessed with a wealth of creative talent, not least in relation to our amazing fashion designers. I popped into Totty Rocks to have a chat with Holly, who set up this business with Lindsay 12 years ago. So Holly, the name Totty Rocks, who came up with that idea?
Lindsay and myself, we were talking about what we're going to call ourselves, and we didn't want anything too serious. We loved the word Totty, and we thought, Totty Rocks. It just came out of the blue, and it made us both smile, so we thought that's a good start.
Oh, I'm drawn instinctively to this piece, so tell me a bit about this one.
This is our tartan waterfall skirt, and I created that for my friend that lives in London, so it's inspired by her. She wore it with a little short jacket, and it's become one of our most popular items this season.
Lovely. You've got some celebrity customers as well. Tell me a bit about them.
Yes, well, we have Lorraine Kelly. She came into our old boutique that we had, and she's come back every year and just ordered a few dresses at a time, but she wears it on screen and people recognise it, and then when she wears it, suddenly we have orders coming in on the internet.
I think Tracy Ullman also, did she not copy Nicola Sturgeon's suits?
She did, but yes, the order was placed and I didn't know it was for Tracy Ullman. And then I saw it on the TV and I was like, oops, I didn't realise, but it's all fun, and I think Nicola thinks it's fun as well. So all of our clothes are available to anybody, any size, shape, age. So they come in, they've had a look at our website, seen all our styles that we do. They can pick their own fabrics, add little tweaks, make it suit them, and we do it made to measure, and it's all for the same cost as off the peg.
Because there's obviously this idea that if you're having something made to measure, it's going to be exponentially more expensive. So I take it you've worked on trying to ensure that you can beat the prices.
Absolutely, yeah. We see that as a tax on having a different shape or being tall, so we hand cut and make everything anyway, so it makes no difference to us.
Do you feel that in your business that there's a strong desire to have things that are Scottish and items made in Scotland?
Yes, I think people look fondly upon Scotland. Internationally, they look at Scotland. It's a strong, small and unique country with a lot of identity, with tartan and whiskey, and so different. It's like exotic,
So Totty needs to keep rocking.
It certainly does.
Thank you, Holly.
Thank you.
Tasmina, I've got a wee confession to make. Earlier on, it was you who told me to say that tartan was the new black. Mm-hmm. But what on earth does that mean?
It means that everybody likes to have a black item in their wardrobe that they can wear on any occasion. And I think increasingly, and certainly after my discussion with Totty Rocks, tartan is taking its place, in the world, and everyone wants a fashion item that has a tartan element to it. So they've taken advantage of that as a business, which is a really good thing to do.
And how important is this Scotland a brand concept?
Oh, hugely important. And I think in terms of fashion, they have orders from all around the world, and many people from show business also who are increasingly wearing tartan. And, they believe Scotland, the brand, is very strong, and people want a piece of Scotland in their wardrobe and what they wear. And I think it's great, just as our food and drink industry is great, our creatives are doing really well on the international stage, and it's great to see people taking advantage of that.
Well, let's wish them every success. Just before Christmas 1988, Pan Am Flight 103 en route from London to New York came down in the small Scottish town of Lockerbie. In one of the worst terrorist atrocities in history, 259 passengers and crew were lost, in addition to 11 residents on the ground. 20 years later, in a hugely controversial decision, Scotland's Justice Secretary Kenny MacAskill decided on compassionate grounds to release back to Libya the only man convicted, to date at least, of being part of that conspiracy. Today I speak to Kenny MacAskill to find out whether we are any closer to the truth of who was really responsible for the Lockerbie bombing. Can you remember where you were that night as a normal citizen when the news came through?
Absolutely. I think it's seared in the soul of every Scot. When I was at home, my wife was out, our eldest son was about 13 months old, and at the end of the news programme that had been on, just about 10 to 8, it came down and said that there was a plane had gone missing over southwest Scotland. That was all. And
of course, you couldn't possibly know that over 20 years later, you would be the Justice Secretary in a Scottish government, and it fell upon you to decide on the release or potential release of the only person convicted of that terrorist atrocity, Mr. Abdul Basit al-Megrahi. So by the 2009, you were the centre of world attention. So tell me what you were thinking when you went to make your decision.
I was thinking of just doing my job and doing my duty, and there was a lot of pressure.
It's quite difficult to explain because of the complexities of the case. You turned down the Libyan government application for prisoner transfer under the deal they'd made with the British government, but you approved Mr. Megrahi's application for compassionate release because he had prostate cancer. Can you explain how you made two different decisions in these applications?
I have to say I would normally grant a prisoner transfer application. I've always felt it was right and appropriate, and even the likes of Nelson Mandela had argued that Megrahi should be closer to home. But I refused it, and I did so because it became quite clear that the British and Americans had done a deal with the Libyans at the time of the agreement that Megrahi and his then co-accused would come back to face trial, that if they were convicted, the sentence would be served in a Scottish prison. I got that not from the British government, who ran for cover, but I got it from Eric Holder, who at that stage was the US Attorney General. He had also been the Assistant US Attorney General at the time of these negotiations, and he made it quite clear that when they were negotiating, the UN was brokering these discussions between Britain and America. They had said, if there's a conviction, he serves his sentence. And on that basis, I felt that trumped what I would normally have done, which would have returned him to Libya to serve his sentence in the Libyan jail. That then drew me on to dealing with the question of compassionate release. And an application had come in because it was only in the September that he had been diagnosed with terminal prostate cancer. But there were criteria that he had to be within a diagnosis of 3 months life expectancy.
He did live for almost 3 years.
He lived for significantly longer than that. I think there's good reason for that. He was given treatment that wasn't then available under the NHS. It was quite clear that Mr. Megrahi was turning his face to the wall. He was a sick man. He didn't wish to be treated in Scotland, and he declined treatment. But I also think it's about values. I've always taken the view that no matter what somebody has done, they're somebody's mother or father, their son or daughter. I think there should be some dignity in death.
Within a reasonably short space of time, people accepted that you'd done your best in a difficult position. The people rather admired the Scottish Government standing up to very clear pressure. And as more and more information came out, it became pretty clear that the Labour government at the time had been actively seeking the release of Mr. Megrahi. In the first place, indeed, the Cabinet Secretary found this when the new government came in and did a study and review of it. So it's maybe the best laid schemes of mice and men Afghan Agli.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think Scotland's a strange wee place, as you know well. I think as soon as Senator Menendez and other Americans became very hostile towards me, even Scots who hadn't perhaps supported my decision felt that he's one of us, leave him alone. And I think the hypocrisy still comes out as even a few weeks back further revelations about what MI6 and the CIA were doing with the Libyan regime.
Political parties which were busy attacking you for releasing Mr. Megrahi on compassionate grounds, their own party leadership had simultaneously been trying to get him released on trade investment on oil grounds.
Well, political parties and governments were shameful in their hypocrisy. They were double-dealing. I'd always known that Scotland was a small cog in a big wheel. I'd never realised how small a cog we were or how big a wheel. A month after I was being criticised for releasing Megrahi, it was coming to light that the British, through the Police Service of Northern Ireland, were training Gaddafi's elite battalion. It's also since become clear that Britain, through and with assistance of the United States, was rendering prisoners to Colonel Gaddafi. So this was about building a relationship between the West and Gaddafi, and Scotland was slapped about mercilessly. I believe we did the right thing, and yet Britain and America were conniving to achieve what we delivered, but blaming us for doing what we did for the right reasons.
So when Tony Blair was in the desert in the tent with Colonel Gaddafi, it was uppermost in his mind bringing Libya back into the nexus, the fold of Western approval, or it was uppermost in his mind the reissuing of the licences that BP and other oil companies wanted?
Well, it's quite clear. I mean, I researched it and came out with a timeline Gaddafi and Blair met. met. The following day, a huge deal was signed for a major oil company. And the day after that, prisoners were rendered by the MI6 to the CIA. So Colonel Gaddafi got things back, as well as people getting access to his country's natural resources.
If you follow that and understand that, then why do you still think Megrahi was guilty?
I think it's quite clear he was at a level of such seniority that he was acceptable to the West, and he was also not senior enough to be a threat to the Gaddafi regime.
Is there a prospect of further convictions which might get to the heart of who was actually taking the decision?
Well, there could be, and equally some of these people are languishing in jail in Libya and it's hard to get them out. But there is one person who's out, and that's Moussa Koussa, who was the Foreign Secretary. He was obviously acting as a double agent on behalf of Britain and America, because as Human Rights Watch declared that he had been turned and CIA papers disclosed that. He was sprung by MI6 from Tunisia. He's been brought to London. He's now elsewhere in the Middle East. He must know.
Moussa Koussa, Foreign Secretary for the Gaddafi regime, was brought to London on the fall of the regime in 2011, and then I think the Scottish authorities did get to interview him, if I remember correctly, and then he was spirited away first to Qatar. I mean, would seem surprising to people watching that somebody who was clearly had a key role in things was brought to London and then put on a plane to go away.
Well, I think it's that cynical world of international dialogue. He was debriefed by MI6 long before Scottish prosecutors got anywhere near him. They weren't going to be able to prosecute him in any shape or form, and I'm sure that he would have been on their list of people, given his seniority in the regime. But a deal had been done. As I say, Scotland was pilloried for following our laws, and I think upholding the correct value. Meanwhile, Britain and America were seeking to improve their trade links, access Libyan minerals, and were also propping up the Gaddafi regime until such time as they decided that they had to tear him down.
Will we ever find out the full truth of Pan Am 103, the Lockerbie bombing, or will it be one of these things in history and politics that are never quite explained?
I think it is going to be a bit of the grassy knoll at Dallas. I think there'll always be doubts, because there'll always be people who don't accept it. And there still is that million-dollar question of how did they get the suitcase on board at Malta. But it's got to be remembered that as a consequence of getting it on board at Malta, Pan Am went into administration. And so I think, it went on at Malta. We don't quite know how. I've got a theory in my book about how I think it went on. But I think there's no doubt Libya did it, but they were aided and abetted by others. Megrahi had a role, but it was a relatively minor role. People do know. Moussa Koussa knows, and he's currently in the Middle East. Sanusi knows. Saif Gaddafi knows. They're there. They can argue, but whether we'll actually hear further, I doubt very much.
Kenny McCaskill, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Powerful stuff. As Kenny McCaskill has told us, he made his decision to release Mr Megrahi according to the law of Scotland and on compassionate grounds. Here is my view. Is it possible for somebody to be guilty yet wrongfully convicted? Yes, it is. Kenny McCaskill is correct. The forensic evidence compiled by the Scottish authorities and the FBI clearly identified Libyan involvement, and Malta as the place where the bomb was planted. Mr Megrahi was a high-ranking Libyan intelligence official on the scene at the time. This supports the charge that he, acting with others, was part of the Lockerbie conspiracy. However, his conviction was not just based on the strength of that evidence, but on identification evidence, which is, to say the least, open to question. Back in 2009, Kenny McCaskill was aware of this, as was I as Scotland's First Minister. And we were aware of something else. The total cynicism of some of those who attacked the Scottish Government for our decision. Throughout this period, the British Government of first Tony Blair and then Gordon Brown were secretly acting to promote Mr Megrahi's release, and not on the grounds of compassion or justice, but for trade, for big business and for oil. Such is state hypocrisy. From all of us here at the Alex Salmond Show, it's goodbye for now.